Hello, and welcome to What Happens in This House Stays in This House Strength Over Silence podcast. I am your host, Miss Tammy Montgomery, Dozier, and I'm alone today, no special guest or anything. So I just wanted to talk to you today about this topic that we don't discuss enough in the African American community, which is anxiety and depression. And I want to give you a little bit of insight of who I am and why I chose this platform, mental illness, to talk about. So when I was younger, I was molested by a family friend, 12 to 14 years old for a couple of years. And then when I was older, I had gone out on a date and I was raped when I was in my 20s. I had no idea that these incidents were creating depression, anxiety, and all these things in me. By the time I had gotten raped, within about the next 3 or 4 years, I had gained over 100 pounds. I had become distant as well as angry. I would go around and throwing things in my family. I would be screaming and yelling all the time. So finally I went to the doctor and they diagnosed me with depression. And they said I was manic depressive, which they call bipolar disorder now. And they didn't do any testing. I think they just said, well, because I was angry, that's what they wanted to say. And they just wanted to give me medication. I never took the medication because I didn't think that, I didn't think, as what they say, quote unquote, that I was crazy. And that is the stigma that is put on mental illness. So what happened when I was in my 20s, I ended up going on this spiritual retreat, which helped me wholeheartedly. And I thought that I had changed and things were different, but they weren't. What it did, the spiritual retreat just opened me up to different things and to life and helped me understand myself a little bit better. But I still, wasn't well or anything that like I thought I was. So let's fast forward to some years in my 40s. I had this mental breakdown. Everything just started coming to me all at one time, all the things that had happened to me in my past. And that's what happens when you sweep things under the rug and you don't deal with them. They come back full force. Now, I'm not saying that I wasn't depressed or I wasn't going through anything in my entire life, because I was. I kept going through weight issues and finance issues and different things, not wanting to deal with myself or anything in my life that I had created that had given me anxiety or depression. So by the time I got into my 40s, it had just hit full-fledged, and I didn't know what to do. I had gone to the doctor, and the doctor was like, oh my God, you're experiencing depression. Then she wanted to get me in to talk to someone and give me medication. And it had gotten so bad, and my depression was so bad that I would cry every single day. And then I would just want to lay down. It had gotten so bad. My parents, they would pray for me. They would come over. My dad would come over to the house, and my mom, and they would all pray with me and stand up, and try to help and try to beat this thing, because I had no idea what this was. I had no idea that I had fallen into that deep of a depression. People talk about suicide and taking your life. I was afraid to live, but too scared to die. Now, if I had just went to sleep and not woken up, I probably would thought that would have been okay. It's just that I didn't know what to do, and I just wanted the pain to end. So finally, one day, I ended up having to talk to someone. I ended up having to get counseling for all the things I had to talk about my past, which was so hard to do. I had to deal with me. I had to deal with the issues of how things were not my fault, how being molested was not my fault, how being raped was not my fault. Because when I went on the date, I was like, you know what, I really don't want to do this. And between the ages of 12 and 14, I'm like, why wasn't I not smart enough to stop this? Why couldn't I have not told this grown man that I didn't want to do this? So I had to deal with all of that stuff. I had to deal with me. And that was one of the hardest things to do in my life. And this is why I talk about these things. This is why I talk about mental health, because I had no idea the effects of what was going on in my life. And I'm sure there are many people out there to this day who have gone through things and thinking like, you know what? Because I'm able to get up and go to work every day and I'm able to take care of the kids and take care of the family. And they think that they are okay because they're able to get up and do those things. I mean, I thought I was pretty well functioning. I had gone to school, gotten a bachelor's, gotten my master's. So, hey, I'm moving. I act, I sing, I do all these things, written stage plays, written books, but yet I still wasn't happy. Yet I thought that I was not good enough. For those who know me, in my book, I talked about having gastric bypass surgery when I was in my 20s because I had found myself over 100 pounds overweight. And when you have that surgery, you have to go to the doctor, psychologist, and they have to see how well you are mentally. And the doctor said, you know what, you're extremely smart, you're extremely intelligent. However, once you have the surgery, it's not going to be okay because you just don't think that you're good enough. And it wasn't until I got older that I really understood what he was saying. That because I hadn't dealt with some things in my past, although I'm getting this done to look differently on the outside, on the inside, I was still going to be the same. And I just so totally agree with that. Because even after that and I lost the weight, I still saw this big girl. I still didn't see a small girl. I didn't see what everybody else saw. It took a long time before I saw me, being whoever the creator created me to be. That was one of the hardest things. Oftentimes thought about the things that I was not versus the things that I am. And with that, I want to talk about a little bit more about depression and anxiety. And how do you know that you have it? Is it something that you know? Is it something that you just think that, okay, well, I'm just worried this day and I'll be okay the next? And with anxiety and depression, it can take on different forms. It depends on your age, your gender, your cultural background. It's different in different people. Like in men, anxiety and depression can often manifest themselves in anger, irritability, maybe even reckless behavior. Women, we are more likely to exhibit feelings of worthlessness, guilt, persistent fatigue. Children and adults may vary. Separation anxiety sometimes, as well as clinginess, and then sometimes being defiant. As you know, having troubles in schools, different things if you see your child changing. For older adults, for seniors, depression can include memory loss, substance abuse, even, loss of interest in hobbies, activities, not wanting to do anything. So in different people, it can do different things. And let's just talk about some of the definitions again and symptoms such as excessive worrying. Sometimes we think that, okay, well, I'm just worried about maybe getting a bill paid or something like that. But excessive worrying can be about things that are not even that important. Sometimes I had a tendency of just worrying often about things that didn't really even matter. And you try your best to ignore them, but you just can't. And you constantly worry. That's excessive. Feeling of restlessness or even being on edge, just being tense. Sometimes even accompanied by fear and panic, unable to concentrate on different things. That is also a part of anxiety and depression. Muscle tension. Sometimes we have these aches and pains, chronic pains, recurring illnesses. Sometimes you even feel sore and physical exhausting, even though you haven't done anything, you haven't exercised or anything. That can be part of depression. Feeling of worthlessness, like I said, what we as women suffer sometimes, having low self-esteem. And I know for me, many years, I dealt with low self-esteem, not thinking I was good enough, getting into relationships where I'm trying to please the person because I just wanted to be loved and liked. Excessive guilt is also another thing. Dwelling in the past. And sometimes people even feel guilty about mental illness in itself because they think that there is something wrong with them. Guilt over symptoms of depression can be a vicious cycle. And it's so important to get help. Withdrawing from family and friends is another one. I had this one pretty bad. And most people didn't even know because it just looks like I just didn't come around or maybe I was just too busy. But sometimes I just didn't want to be bothered. I just wanted to be left alone. I just wanted to be in my home by myself. And as my parents would say, just having a self-pity party. And that's how I felt, that I was just pitying myself, not knowing why, because things in my life actually were good, but I couldn't see it for whatever it is that what I was going through internally. Reckless behavior can be another part of that. Driving recklessly. And this is more common in men than in women with this type of behavior. As I said before, being fatigued, not wanting to get out of bed, changing of sleep habits, staying up all night and wanting to sleep during the daytime, and sometimes often having a hard time falling asleep. Changing appetite. Sometimes you want to overeat. Sometimes you don't want to eat at all. Anger and irritability. I experienced that. Everything somebody said or did to me just made me angry. And I had such a huge anger problem. And I'm grateful that I was able to learn how to, get rid of that and control that. As I talked before about the physical pains and always being sad, not being happy about anything, constantly. You find yourself in the throes of despair. You just feel like you're in a bad mood all the time without even knowing why. Having a hard time concentrating. And one of the ones is suicidal. Many people have this suicidal issues. And I know for me, again, as I said before, I was too afraid to live and too scared to die. If I was brave enough, I probably would have, the way I was feeling. But I just couldn't do it to myself. I just didn't have the will to do it to myself. And I'm grateful that I had the people around me who made sure that I was okay, who made sure that, hey, they constantly checked up on me, my family. And they didn't go around sharing it with everybody. And the people that I told, or when I finally had the courage to talk about it, I had some great people in my life who encouraged me and helped me to get through a lot of this. With everything going on and with the suicides and the people in our community, one of the things that has happened is with the COVID-19, the racism, depression, and anxiety have spiked in our community. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to listen to the Mental Health Channel TV with Dr. Michael A. Lindsay, and he's going to discuss what is going on in our community.
When you look at the historical experience of African Americans in the United States, you have to start with the experience of slavery and the vestiges of slavery in terms of the trauma associated with it. And I think that Blacks continue to experience trauma in certain ways, and certainly with respect to those who live in urban communities that are infested with drugs or that are particularly violent. Those are traumatic situations that they experience on a daily basis. Certainly, as we've seen in recent events, interactions with the police can be, again, particularly traumatic. So when you talk about mental illness in the Black community, I think you have to begin with the experience of trauma and how trauma continues to abound in their experiences and in their daily lives. I think that what happens for a lot of individuals is that they suffer in silence with respect to having a mental illness. And so what I mean by that, in the greater society, there's certainly a lot of stigma associated with mental illness. It's sort of antithetical to the American ethic, which is to, be strong and courageous, to pull yourself up by the bootstrap, to weather the storm, etc. I think the second part of that, point is what's happening at the community level or the society level. And I think what happens is that within the Black community, I think that, again, that ethic about what it means to be strong and courageous is particularly pronounced because of trying to combat those forces like discrimination or racism. And it just adds to the burden of, sort of what it means to survive. And so then the person who's struggling with the mental illness is perhaps not embraced or, warmly accepted because of their struggles. I remember as a young person growing up, I used to hear about the person who was quote unquote sent down south. I used to wonder what that meant. And it wasn't until I got older that I became, more knowledgeable of the fact that that person was struggling with a mental illness or perhaps substance abuse. From a historical perspective, there's been a lot of emphasis in the Black community, particularly in Black families, on keeping your problems close to the vest in the home. You don't share what's going on with outsiders. No one can treat you as best as your family can. You bring all your burdens and your problems to your family. And if you do take it to any entity outside of your family, it's the Black church. The church is really important in the Black community. Make no mistake about it. It's a source of, sort of salvation and healing, and there's the whole collective support from, you get from your fellow churchgoers and that sort of thing. But I think also what has historically happened is that the church has been defined as the place to, sort of relieve your symptoms or to address your burdens. And so it stops there. And what I think needs to happen is that, first of all, I think pastors and lay ministers can be more trained in the signs and presentations of mental illness. But I think that the church could be sort of a triage unit, if you will, such that it identifies those who have needs, and it's that sort of first step and the sort of entree into care, but it shouldn't stop there. I believe that culturally competent care is critical to everything. If patients perceive that providers are inauthentic and do not care about their unique circumstances, then they're likely to be turned off. At a baseline, providers should understand the history of their neighborhoods, for example, or the history of the experience of African Americans and Latinos, such that they can put the clinical presentation into context and understand what unique factors are in play with respect to the clinical presentation and how that person is seeking to, survive and live in the world as an African American or a Latino. And so I think that the onus is on the provider to understand that context and to understand what it means for that person to live in that context.
Now, what Dr. Lindsay said, he said that a lot of the stigma with African Americans can be traced back to slavery, which was a trauma in our life. And some people may not believe that, but going through that in our ancestors and then being raised by our ancestors, and it keeps going forward and forward. And then with all of the things that are going on today, part of that does have to do with the illness within our community, and to why we probably, some of us, don't want to get help for it. And also what I was reading, which really, I guess, may or may not have surprised me, is that after the incident with George Floyd, with the pandemic and all the other things that have happened, that awakened something in us. But it also spiked the anxiety and the depression within us. They said that within a week, anxiety and depression among African Americans shot to a higher rate than experienced by any other racial or ethnic group, with a 41% screening positive for at least one of those symptoms that I gave you before. They said that depression rose from 36 to 41% in that week of people viewing that George Floyd video. So that is about 1.4 million people. So with the coronavirus and the police brutality, it had an effect on us, on our mental and physical health as African Americans. With the COVID-19, the mortality rate for African Americans is 2.4 times as high as the rates for whites and 2.2 times as high as in the rates for Asians and Latinos. So 1 in every 1,850 Black Americans have died. 1 in 4,000 Latinos have died. 1 in 4,200 Asian Americans have died, and 1 in 44 white Americans have died from corona. So again, we are 2 times likely to die with this virus. So we have had more depression, fear, and anxiety over these last couple of months with everything that is going on. Also, I read something that says pre-COVID-19 in the last 8 to 10 years, we have seen an increase in the number of suicide attempts in our African American youth. Increased reports of stress and anxiety in African Americans in general. And unfortunately, we have also seen an increase in a lack of mental health care for the African American community. We are experiencing a lot right now. Think about it. How many people can do this? I mean, you have racism. You have a virus. A lot of people, family members have passed on from this. You're already dealing with the work situation. You had to deal with the kids having to stay home from school. And midst of that, people are staying in the house and you've been hearing that there are more domestic problems because people are in the house because of this virus. You can't get out and get around people, and then you're stuck in the house with everyone. And then you go out with the fear of catching something because you know that in your community, you're twice as likely to get it. And you don't feel that you're going to get the adequate care when you go to the hospital as everybody else. And then your family members in the hospital and you're not sure what kind of care they're getting because you can't even go in there and see them to make sure that they are okay. That is a lot to deal with. In the midst of then you're scared to go outside. You have African Americans being hung from trees. As a woman, it's scary going outside because you just don't know. My husband, I fear for him because he's a Black man out, going out. We as a people have put up with so much. How else can we not have any type of anxiety or depression or anything like that? And, having church from home, and many people say that, it's not the same as being in the building itself. And I do get that. The congregation or just feeling the energy of the other people within the building. Everybody knows that, hey, the Creator and God is within you and the church is within you. However, sometimes just being around people and being able to hold other people and just having that can sometimes help you. And just having a kind word or going to church and having a smiling face and people just saying hello and just feeling the energy of the other people, that can help as well. With all of this being said, there are some things that we can do to help each other. We can get health care, or we can join groups, or we can do different things to try to help each other out. But they say 25% of African Americans seek health care, mental health care, versus 40% of other races. And that is because we do have a stigma in our community. As the name of my show is, what happens in this house stays in this house. And those are things that we have to get out of and things that we have to get rid of. And oftentimes, you hear people say, well, you don't, all you need to do is go to church. And in our community, many people think that mental health means weakness. And also, what I do believe is this, and firmly, is that reaching out for help doesn't make you weak. It does make you strong. meaning that, you know what, I do need help. Everything is not seeming clear to me. I do have a feeling that I want to hurt myself. I do have a feeling that I may want to hurt somebody else. I do feel like, you know what, I panic when I have to get up and get outside and deal with other people. And what we can do is we can bring awareness to other people about mental health. We can educate our family and our friends and let them know that this is something in our community. And we can become aware of our own self and the things that we're going through. Self-awareness is something. If you can look at yourself, that is just, you're almost there. If you can say, well, you know what? I'm not feeling good today. This can't be that normal. We have gotten so used to, in a community, being upset and always having to do this and always having to act this way and always having to stand a higher ground and different things. It has taken a toll on us. And I highly do believe that. And what we need to do too, and if you are going to go out there and get help, make sure you get someone who's culturally competent to take care of you. Because our needs and whatever else that we have in our community is not like everybody else's needs. You know, you might want to ask whoever you seek to go out there to say, hey, have you ever treated African Americans before? Have you received training in cultural competence or African American mental health? You know, what type of cultural background do you have? And try to find out those things about them, because everybody, you know, people say, you know, it's Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, but everybody does not know the plight of the Black person. They want to think that they do. They want to think that, well, all lives matter. But a lot of times when you're going outside into the world, they're not looking at you as an all life. They're looking at you as a Black life. And oftentimes you do feel that when you are out in the community. And I heard somebody say, that's just like when people say all lives matter. It's just like going to somewhere for cancer and they say, oh, well, what about diabetes? And right now we're just trying to take care of this problem. We're saying that right now, Black people have racial injustice. Even when, with mental health, we don't have the adequate care and we don't have the adequate people out there that's able to take care of us. So we have to come together. We have to create groups. We have to get together to try to help ourselves as well. We have different companies that are out there that can help. And, my company, which is Connected by Love Consulting, I am willing to go. You give me a call and I can get out there and we can find people together. I do have contacts with different health organizations that I have worked with that have come out to speak at some of my benefits, which is a thing that I do to make people aware of what's going on in our community. And my number is 708-892-2278, 708-892-CAST, C-A-S-T. And if you need to reach me, you can shoot me out a text or even shoot me out an email at tammym@cblconsulting.net, tammym@cblconsulting.net. And I am so willing to help you. We can get through this together. And again, I want to thank you for listening to me this week. Again, please reach out to me. The name of my book, if you want to hear more of my story, is called Addicted to Pain. The Pain Stops When the Silence Ends. It can be purchased on Amazon.com under the name Tammy Montgomery Dozier. And you get to hear more insight of what I went through, what I have overcame, and how each day, is a day to get better and a day to go out and help other people to see what can be done. So again, thank you for listening to my podcast this week. What happens in this house stays in this house. And remember that we are all connected by love. Have a good one.